Hello everyone. I wanted to kick off this strategy series for Axis and Allies Anniversary Edition by looking at Japan. So with the 1942 anniversary setup, which is what we have going on over here, Japan is the first country to go, and that's why we're going to start with them. Now this video isn't going to be about, move 2 infantry here and move 1 there and bring your bomber halfway across the world to attack here. More so, it's going to be about things to focus on. Here are some directives that you want to follow, and follow them to the best of your ability. If you need to sacrifice one because something has really gone awry in another part of the world, that's fine. If you need to send more troops or fewer troops because something else has taken precedence, that's fine too, but these are things that you always want to keep in your focus in some fashion. So first we'll actually start with China for this video. Or Asia, rather, China being a big part of it. On your first turn, you do go before the Soviet Union, so it's unlikely that you're going to be doing much up against the Soviet Union up here. This is only worth 1 territory, that's only worth one territory. You have to fight through a couple infantry. We literally only start the game with 1 transport. It starts here, so the most you can get is 2 infantry up there. It's only worth 1 production. You can get a few more up here, but then that means pulling guys away from China, and you've got these Chinese infantry to worry about. So you're probably not going to worry about the Soviet Union the first turn. Now, after the first turn, depending on what the Soviets do up here, if they maybe pull back for some reason and you want to expand, that's fine. If they consolidate down here along your border, you're always going to want to make sure you have enough guys in Manchuria so that they don't attack you. Just enough defense there. Maybe you build a factory there, maybe you don't, but if the Soviets start marching down this way, especially if the Americans are coming in this way, which we'll get into a little bit later, you losing Manchuria is a big deal. It's worth the most production of all of these, all of your coastal territories, and it borders the sea zone around Japan, so if there's a factory there, maybe you built it and the Allies take it, that's not good for you. You definitely don't want to lose Manchuria. But really, you just need to defend it. You're unlikely, at least in the direction of the Soviet Union, going to be marching up that direction anytime soon. Now let's kind of sweep down here. There are a number of territories in China we could hit. If we really wanted to stretch ourselves, we could hit 4 territories. Here, 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 and here. That would leave China with only 3 territories left. They get 1 infantry for every 2 territories that are not controlled by Axis powers, so they would only get 1 infantry. That would be kind of nice if we could make that happen. On the other hand, you will be stretched out quite a bit because you have a very limited number of infantry along here. You're going to need to make very good use of all of your fighters and your bomber up here. And so what kind of position will that leave you in? Is that worth preventing China from 1 extra infantry? And these territories aren't worth a whole lot. They're only worth 1 apiece. One of the things that I favor, there are 2 things to be looking at here. One is you don't want to attack you want to keep an eye on the number of territories you need to defend from. You don't want to attack out somewhere. Let's say we attack just from French Indochina up here. Well, China's here. You still need to defend this every territory you had to defend before, plus this new one. You want to keep that down to a minimum. And so, while I do favor going after this fighter here, or going after this territory, because it has the only real Chinese offense in it, that fighter, and if you could take out that fighter, that is going to be a huge benefit to you. I also, at a minimum, recommend taking this territory on the first turn, because then you only have four territories to defend from China. Manchuria, what is that, Guangzhou, I think, Guangzhou, Kwangtung, I'm sorry, you don't have Kwangtung. This territory and this territory. So basically, your border stretches like this. You don't have a border that does this weird thing. It's just straight all the way across there. Now, to get enough infantry up into here, you are probably going to have to leave Burma defenseless. But if the British start marching this way, moving away from India, unless they build a factory in India, that'll make it a little easier for us to swing back around, which is something we are ultimately going to want to do. But if we can kill that fighter, that's going to be really helpful. Position ourselves so that we have at least some air forces over here and a transport down here somewhere, so that if India is really defenseless or is not defended heavily, we can drop off 2 infantry there, throw in a bunch of air power, and potentially take it. If India is still well defended, maybe they moved 1 guy forward, but they moved some guys over here. On England's first turn, we can at least take Burma back. We don't have to worry about as much from China because they don't have a fighter, and then we're going to keep pushing towards India. Going further south, we have enough here, enough force to take out that British fleet, and generally that's going to be a good idea for us to do, so they can't do annoying things and that their fighter can't go off and either defend India or help defend China or engage in offensive activities. If they don't build a factory here, they're going to be very limited if they don't have that fighter. If they don't build a factory and still have the fighter, at least they still have a little bit of offense and more defense that they wouldn't have otherwise had. So we are going to want to take that out. Also, that means that if they decide to move this transport over here, our fighters are in close proximity. We can easily take it out, so they're not going to be able to move this way with that transport and do annoying things on that front. Now we're going to come across the Pacific here. Unlike in other versions of the game, at least with the 1942 setup, England does not have a navy down here. So really it's just the American fleet that we have to worry about. Now I am of mixed opinion on this because we can't get our fleet, which right now is just a battleship because transports can't attack or defend, and we'd want to send the transport this way anyway. So really, it'd be the battleship, but nothing from this Z-zone can make it to Hawaii. So we're left with this sub, this destroyer, carrier, and fighter, and this cruiser. We can probably take out the American fleet without the fighter, but if we really want to make sure we take them out, we will need to send that fighter. Now, America, on its turn, is going to have plenty of forces. It has a battleship, a cruiser, a sub, the fighter on the Hawaiian Islands, the fighter on the west coast of the U.S., this bomber, as well as a bomber over on the east coast. I'm not going to zoom all the way over there. Y'all know what a bomber looks like. But they have another bomber over that way. They can easily swing in here and destroy whatever's left. This is a question to ask yourself. A, is it worth it to me to maybe kill this carrier before it gets another fighter on it? It can't defend quite as well as at max. Do I want to prevent the American fleet from consolidating, because then it's even more powerful? Or am I not worried about that? Do I want to use this extra fighter over this way and make sure, you know, that bomber and this fighter from up on Japan go that way? At this stage, I kind of lean towards, yes, it is advantageous to take this out to make sure another fighter doesn't land on the carrier, to make sure these two fleets don't combine, even at the loss of a handful of ships myself. Now, and also because I can use my air power, aside from this fighter, which I'm going to send in here to make sure I kill that, and, you know, I don't have a one round of below average dice rolls and suddenly I've lost my ships and America's able to consolidate. But everything else I'm probably going to be sending over this way on the first turn, especially if I decide to go all out after China. I'm going to need this fighter and this bomber up here. But I would send just enough to take this out, so they can't consolidate, they can't maximize the defensive value of that carrier. But then I'm also going to build at least some sort of a navy up here that can fight. So aside from transports, maybe it's a carrier. It doesn't need to be a lot. Having a carrier would allow me on turn 2 or 3 to maybe shift the fighters that were over here back over this way and defend against America. If you're playing a game and you believe, for whatever reason, that the Allies are all going to focus on Germany, then that'd be another reason to come over here, because if the U.S. has to send a bomber and maybe it was going to send this fighter over to the East Coast, now you're distracting them, forcing them to pulse back over here to wipe you out. And if they don't wipe you out, then that's even better, because then you've killed a chunk of their fleet and you won't suffer dramatic repercussions from that. So also consider what the United States, what you believe they're going to do. But generally, at least at this point, I favor sending at least just enough to kill this, with the understanding that whatever remains the U.S. is going to wipe out, and then building something over here, whether it's a carrier or maybe a couple of destroyers or a couple of subs or something. If you think that the U.S. is going to do anything over to you to make up for this fleet that you've lost. I do like the carrier because you've got plenty of fighters. You can put a couple on it and your navy is going to be in pretty good shape, especially with the addition of this battleship you've got up here, and then you've got this navy, which will be down here the first turn, but you can start swinging it back around if necessary. And having another carrier also gives you more projection of power with your fighters if you want to do something else with it. Maybe the U.S. isn't coming after you, but you're not sure, and so you want to defend Navy, but you also want to be able to get into land. That's better than having the fighters just sitting on Japan. One less movement point. And you can send them out this way if necessary. Ultimately, your goals, if you are playing a tournament game, you're going to want to be looking at victory cities. There is one out this way on Hawaii that you'll want to try and snag up. And so if you can force America back, then you'll definitely want to do that to get this. They are going to be trying to hang on to that. Now, if you're not playing a tournament game and victory cities are less important, there would be less emphasis over here. You're just going to be defending against the U.S., making sure that they can't make inroads this way too much. Taking Hawaii itself isn't as important, but making sure that their fleet cannot overpower yours, making sure that their fleet can't outmaneuver yours is going to be important. But just holding them off. Then as far as the rest of the war goes, you will want to make sure that China just doesn't get too powerful. These territories aren't worth much. You're not going to get much out of them. You just don't want a huge horde of Chinese infantry pressing down on you that you're going to have a hard time either defending against or counterattacking. But as long as you hold them to an infantry or two per turn and just keep an eye on it, you're probably not going to be in bad shape. Same thing up with Manchuria up here. Eventually, may come a point where you swing up this way, but especially early in game, that is not going to be worth it. Eventually, if you make it through China, you'll be able to hit these territories. Those are worth 2, and they flank some very important Russian territories. So if you can push through this way eventually, that's going to be good for you. Early in game, again, that probably isn't going to happen. You just want to take out that fighter and then push along this way, take out India, and start swinging up over here. Around the time that you're doing that, you'll probably be pushing China up against their very edge. As far as Japan goes, those are the general concepts. Don't ignore this. Make sure you're defending up here against the Soviets so they can't break through. And early on, focus on India. And then depending on how this looks and how this looks, you might push one or the other or both. But early in game, you're probably not going to be doing those things. And then against the U.S., if you're playing tournament by victory city, keep an eye on Hawaii, try and take it at your earliest opportunity. If you're not, just focus on defending against the U.S. Now, there is one other thing I like to do in other versions of the game is build some sort of a factory over here. Now, in terms of production, Manchuria is the best option because you can crank 3 units out per turn as opposed to 2 in these others. The problem with it is that it's all the way up here, away from what should be your primary front early in game against India. So I would actually recommend placing it down here, maybe on the first turn, build a factory and a carrier or something like that. A factory or a carrier and maybe 2 transports. But if you're going to build the factory, I recommend putting it down here because it's next to your primary front early in game. It's going to help you counter if England builds a factory there. If they see you put one here, they almost have to put one here. Otherwise, they know India is going to fall pretty easily by probably turn 3. So it forces them to pull resources away from Germany. Again, if the Allies were all going to go after Germany, that throws a wrinkle into their plan. And you can still push up into China. You can still use this as your staging point to get up into Kazakhstan as well. So in this version of the game, I prefer to put it down in French Indochina if I'm going to build a factory. So those are my tips for Axis and Allies Anniversary Edition 1942 setup with Japan. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's been a while since I've had some regular content. I hope to make at least a few more videos. I know life is busy for everyone, myself included, but you guys have been waiting a while, and so I hope to have a couple more videos out here before too long. Alright, have a good afternoon, everybody.